Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the evidence. And let me restart. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I am privileged to be joined here today by Caroline Crocker. Some of you have heard me mention her name before. She is a writer. She's a speaker, retired biology professor, and a movie star. And today, I had begged and pleaded her to help me get kickstarted on the process of publishing a book. And part of that involves obviously writing it. But she gave a talk at Lorton Library a couple years ago on the process, and she was sharing her journey, how she became a writer. And I was so impressed with all the information she gave that I said, this is going to be so helpful to me. Not only that, in the video description, I'm going to give you links to her work, where you can get a hold of her books if you want to buy them, if you want to visit her website or sign up for a newsletter. She has the most awesome website I've seen in a long time. And I just wanted to find out who was her web developer, because it's such a good website. And so I'm really, I feel very privileged that she'd be willing to help start me on my journey. We go a long ways back. Makes me feel old now. It's about 20 years that we've known each other. But we finally reconnected after a long interval. And I actually thought she was still in California, and word got back to me that she'd moved back to the East Coast where I am, and I've been able to come to her shows. And I recently was at one of her book signings in Fairfax County at a local event, and that was a lot of fun. So it's kind of nice to connect with a friend that I thought would be long and lost, but we've gotten reconnected. And she has a really wonderful family, just a wonderful husband, and she attends a beautiful church that occasionally I visited. So, Dr. Crocker, thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for having me.
So, all right. So let's say it's me and I come up to you and say, Dr. Crocker, how can I publish a book? And how did you, what steps did you take? And what mistakes did you encounter that you think you'd like to spare me from? I know that's a big question, but this is almost like us shooting the breeze on this. So just whatever comes to mind.
Okay, well, if you said that, the first thing I would say is, please call me Caroline. We've been friends for so long, and you're not my student, so do call me Caroline. And I think the other thing I would say as well, have you written one? And from what I understand, you haven't. And so I think, obviously the first step to publishing a book has to be to write it, to think about, okay, what is it that I'm passionate enough about to sit in front of my computer and do the research and type out for a long, long time. Okay. I mean, when I retired from teaching, I thought to myself, well, what is it that I've enjoyed about all my jobs? Because I've had a lot of different jobs. Some people stick with one, but I didn't. I directed a nonprofit, and I directed a for-profit, and I, taught biology students, and I did research in cancer and asthma. So I've had a lot of different jobs. But what I realized was the commonality that I enjoyed about all those jobs was writing. I love writing. And so for me, sitting and writing is a very peaceful, wonderful activity. And I wake up thinking about what I want to write, and I go to sleep thinking about what I'm writing. And so for me, it's enjoyable for me. So not everybody who's a writer is as passionate about it as I am.
Well, this is one thing I'll confess. I noticed that the other forms of writing, aside, I haven't written a book, But like if I'm writing letters, people who know me, I'm notorious for writing really, really long letters. I just cannot stop expressing. I have a very, even though I've been, before I degenerated into becoming an engineer, I was an artist at heart.
Mm-hmm.
I was a musician and wanted to be a novelist. But it's very hard to make a living in those fields. So even though my heart was in literature and in music, I was training to be a concert pianist. I had the talent. I had enough mathematical talent to be an engineer, even though I didn't like it. The professors were saying, they one time my mom called one of my professors, which was unusual because she was so concerned. She was saying, my son Salvador hates computers. He hates all. And the professor said, well, it'd be a tragedy if he didn't go into this field. He's very gifted in that area. And I was like, well, I appreciated that, but it wasn't where my heart was. But I needed to get a job. And I think that was God leading me. It's like, hey, Sal, you have to bear your cross. Sometimes you're going to do, not sometimes, many times you're going to have to do some things that are not very pleasant. And it may open doors for you to find artistic expression eventually. And that was probably one of the wisest counsels I ever got, because having a career in science and engineering, I wasn't worried about paying rent to finance my artistic expression. Now, it would have been nice to be able to be a full-time artist and novelist and composer or whatever. But, the general advice, and one that I actually heard echoed by a famous psychologist named Jordan Peterson, who's specifically talking, he said, I counsel a lot of artists. He said, look, this is going to be tough. You're going to shrivel if you don't pursue your art. But the problem is only a very small fraction are actually able to make a living at it. So you do have to express yourself. Otherwise, it's going to affect you psychologically. So the way you should look at this, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have found that the skills that I developed as a research scientist, I use in my writing. Because as you know, I do write historical books. And, also I just recently wrote a book about God's word and whether it can be trusted. That I use those same skills in my research. I use the skills that I developed in research for writing. And so it is in the same skill set. And honestly, mathematics and music, they're pretty related. So I'm not surprised that you are a good musician and good at math, because that's kind of normal, isn't it?
Yes. There are pictures of these famous physicists with musical instruments. It's just remarkable. So, so if I may ask, do you ever count how many words it takes, how many hours it takes to write a certain number of words? I mean, I can't imagine being some of these reporters that are able to generate so much material, at a consistently high level for just days and years at a time. I mean, I need to be pretty inspired before I will really write something that I like. So if you could share, like, what was your longest book, and how many hours do you think you slaved at the computer to type it out?
I don't know. I have heard from other authors that they discipline themselves to sit at their desk and write this many thousand words before they allow themselves to get up. I've never done that. If I don't feel like writing one day, I don't do it. And if I feel like writing, then I may write all day and into the night. It just depends on how I'm feeling. The writing process, again, it depends on the book. Some books are very easy, they just flow. Others, like the one I'm working on right now, which is called The Truth Was Different, I've spent months just doing the background research. I haven't even, well, I barely started writing. I've written a couple chapters. Because once I had done all the research, it felt like I had an entire sky full of information floating around there. And I was thinking, how am I going to wrestle this into a book? And so I actually took several months when I just didn't do it. I did something else because I couldn't. And it's okay if it just, for me, it's okay if it just hangs out in the back of my head until it's ready to come out. And I found just a couple weeks ago, suddenly I sat down and it began flowing. And I don't know how it happened.
Well, I've heard sometimes that people with that expressive passion, they say sometimes it'll just hit you when you don't expect it. That fit of inspiration will just, like, everything just gels, and I've had that even in my own experience where I've been struggling how to express something, and it'll just hit me at the most random time, and then now I can articulate it. So that actually is very helpful. I am in a phase in my life where I feel that I have some of these, kind of the vague outlines of what I want to say. And part of it, and what some people have done, is some of what they've been expressing in spoken words, like say on their YouTube channels, they start to translate it into a book. And sometimes the banter will, when you're even hearing yourself talk, it's like, that was a good idea, that was a bad idea. And you start to filter through it. I'm like, okay, I didn't say that so well. And then you try to, I have found that they're, all right, for me personally, the more that my writing style starts to sound like my speaking style, the better the writing is. Because when I start reading what I wrote to myself, I'm like, that's awful, when I would just read it aloud. I don't know if you've experienced that.
I always read my books aloud. Once I've read them or written them, or even partway through, I will always read them aloud, because things sound so different when you say them aloud than if you read them. So that is a part of my editing process. I always read it so I can hear what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. That'll be the first filter before I share it with anyone else. So I do remember then, okay, so let's say, I guess there's a point you have, like, do you wait till you have kind of like a finished draft of the entire book before, and then after you've edited your own internal, your own personal review of what you've written, what's the stage? How do you arrange to get other people to read your work?
Yes, I will usually write it and then go through a couple of times editing myself, and then I'll read it out loud and I'll edit it. And then I'll take it through Grammarly, which is a program that will check the grammar and the punctuation. Because the last thing I want my beta readers to do is spend their time saying, oh, you should have had a comma there. I want them to actually look at the content and tell me, does this make sense? Not nitpick the grammar. So I make sure that grammar and punctuation is as perfect as I can get it. I also don't want to waste their time. So I do ask beta readers to read it. I will usually, honestly, my best beta reader is my mom. I'm fortunate enough that mom lives with me, and she's nearly 91. So I will put the book in front of her and I'll go, okay, Mom, I need feedback. And she will go through, and sometimes she totally does not get what I mean. And then I'm tempted to be mad and say, well, why don't you get it? And then I realized, oh, maybe because it's not clear. So I have to, sometimes when people give you feedback, you just got to dial back and maybe even put it on a shelf for a day or two. Because any feedback, they're criticizing your baby. And that can be hard to take. So I find I just need to, put the baby away for a little while and then take it out and have a look and say, oh, okay, I can accept this part of their feedback, but not that. That's stupid. And then I go back and I'm like, oh, yeah, that does make sense. And so that is also a process where I have to go step by step, thinking about and accepting or sometimes rejecting what their feedback is, because it's hard to hear criticism. On the other hand, if you have beta readers who come back to you and say, oh, this is just so good, you are just so wonderful, don't use them again. They're no use to you.
Wise counsel. By the way, the Proverbs, in many counselors, there's victory. And I've taken that to heart on many levels. All even minor things, or maybe not so minor things, like, where should I go to get my car repaired, or what should I do? I mean, I've been continually impressed how the Lord spreads his wisdom among all his people. What didn't seem like it was intended to be concentrated in one individual.
Right. Although, when you're talking about a book, it is not helpful to have a lot of people commenting, because it can make you schizophrenic. If you get all these comments from all these different people, it's overload. So I tend to ask one person, then the next, and not all at once.
And really, I think this is, and you've, and we'll cover this a little bit, you've managed to talk to a lot of writers and prospective writers in their experiences. There are writers that seem very attuned to writing to cater to their audience, and then there are writers that are like, well, I want to express myself accurately so I can be understood. My goal isn't wide readership. The reason I was curious about this is a Harlequin romance. Okay, not that I'm going to write one, but I was hearing like 200 million happy endings sold, which at the time, that might have been 20 years ago, they'd sold that many books. Mm. And people were kind of laughing. I said, they made a standard of it was very formulaic. This is where you introduce the heroes or the protagonists. This is when the conflict will begin in chapter 2. And they just work it. Okay, it's going to be this long, and this is how you're going to structure it. It's very formulaic. And I was like, wow, well, they have a really interesting business model, and it's been selling a lot of books. And there are some writers that are like, okay, I'll just write what the people want to hear. It may not be necessarily what I enjoy. And I've actually met musicians like that who performed lots of music that they just utterly despised. And it wasn't, but they said, well, it's paying the bills and it's what the audiences want. As an anecdote, I only saw this recently. There's a famous popular band, Chicago, and they're notorious for writing these beautiful love ballads in the modern style. They had huge following. I loved their work. Mm-hmm. And then they finally they made an album. They said, we'll just do the music we really like. And the corporate owners who signed, the contract said, this is unreleasable. It's so terrible. Your fan base will totally reject it. And I heard some of the music. I was like, okay, I would not have recognized that it was even the same band. Mm. So I think for me, and I'm guessing, and you can tell me, I'm going to write what I feel is on my heart that needs to be said. Maybe there's someone else that's going to hear it, but at least, my goal is not to just cater to what they want.
And it really depends on why you're writing. I mean, if you're writing because you want to make a career of it and you want to make money, well, then you have to do it to the formula. And, you have to stick to one genre. I've seen a lot of people do that. They always write fantasy or they always write horror, because then when somebody reads their book, and if they like that, they'll buy the next one and the next one. And so every book they publish, they do better. And, and because they're writing to a formula, it's very easy to pump out, book after book without having to spend a lot of time on it. And so that is a good strategy if you want to be a writer who lives on what you earn. On the other hand, if you are a writer who enjoys writing but wants to be free to write whatever you please, well, then you need to accept that you may not make a lot of money, because that's not why you're doing it anyway. And I think that is the case for me. I mean, I started writing when I was retired. So for me, although a couple of my books have been very popular, and when I'm at events, they do sell out, I didn't write them to sell. And the next book in that series is also not one that I'm writing to sell, although it does have some hot button issues in it. Actually, I just read a book where the author put every single hot button issue she could think of in it, and it's pretty hilarious, actually. But you know, that's another way to get books to sell, is put all those hot button issues in there.
Well, if you heard me typing furiously now, I brought up one of your books on Amazon here. I could show it to the audience here. It's Unforgivable. So I'm going to give you a shameless plug here, if that's okay with you. So, okay, let me see if I could do this correctly. So this is your, let me see if I have to put it up here. There it is. This is your bestseller. And look at that. What a great cover. And so there it is, guys. So this is Caroline's book about her dad in World War II, and she has so many other books. I lost count of how many you've written that are on Amazon, and so I just had to share that.
Just finished my 15th book. Yeah, but Unforgivable, like I said, it does sell very well. And the reason is because of that cover and because of the photograph of my dad when he was just a little guy. As you know, he was rejected by his mother and put in a children's home where he was abused. And so the picture does actually show his black eye. He did have a black eye. And he did in most of the photographs. Halfway through the war, the Nazi soldiers came and they sorted the children in that home between Jewish and non-Jewish. Dad was part Jewish, but they didn't take him. And that was what made me want to write the book, to find out why. Why was he not taken? Why wasn't his brother? Why weren't the nurses who were hiding them? But as I'm sure you've heard me say, the biggest question in my mind was, here's a man who had unforgivable things done to him. And because he was abused, he thought he was unforgivable. So how did he grow up to be a good human being? And he did. And I did discover the answer to that question.
Well, there you have it. And by the way, I could see that he grew up to be a good human being because I could see the qualities in his daughter.
Oh, well, thank you.
and I had the privilege of meeting your mom too. I was so glad I had the chance. So both our parents were survivors through World War II. My parents are a little older than yours, and they have since passed on. Dad was a guerrilla fighter in the Philippines in the Pacific War. Mom was living through the Imperial Japanese occupation. And I had wished that I had chronicled more of their story. It's amazing that something that was such a big part of their lives, they almost never talked about. It could be that it was too traumatic. And, you know, they tended to just focus on just like the present day things in their life in America. I mean, there's a lot to just to lose yourself in life in America and forget about everything else. If you've moved from, you know, a third world country and then all the trauma of war, you're just focused on the good times you're having here. And so all that history has been lost. I have one page in my father's diary that describes all of his war adventures, and he fought in many battles. And I realized, why didn't you write more about it? And I'm like, well, okay, this was a live diary. He was probably on the run as he was noting these things, and I could tell it was rushed. He said we had a firefight today, and it lasted from 9 a.m. to like 2 p.m. He would list the casualties and then just move on to the next city. And I'm just like, more, Dad, give me more in your diary. And then they'll just talk about, just like in the diary, there's more about me that he didn't like. Like Sal left the door. One of the last diary entries, he said Sal left the garage door open. I was so mad at him. It was like, or Sal had his graduation party and so forth, and just kind of random things. We said, okay, I don't know that he even. I mean, I looked for it. There's no record of when the atomic bomb exploded or like when the war ended. It was almost just like, okay, everyone knows this. I don't really need to record it. But then I think when the Twin Towers were attacked, the 9/11 tragedy, he did record that. And then the Iraq War, he recorded the births of his children, and it's very terse, Then I realized, okay, he's going through a lot of trauma. He's not going to wax poetic like I would, He's a man of few words. So yeah, I just thought that had nothing to do with the purpose of our talk. I just had to share that with you and how much I appreciate what you've done to collect what happened to your dad.
Well, it reminds me, I actually had the privilege of speaking with my dad's cousin. Her father went to Auschwitz during the war. And he did survive. His wife and his first family of children did not. They were all murdered there. But she said that she asked him about the tattoo on his arm, and he told her, oh, that's where I keep my phone number in case I forget. And then when she got older, he said to her, the thing you need to do in life is forgive, and then forgive. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. He didn't talk about Auschwitz, but he did make sure to impress upon his new family of daughters that they should forgive.
That's beautiful to hear. I will say I did have some curiosity with my dad. Occasionally I would hear him in the house screaming at the top of his lungs, and he's having a nightmare. And I said, Dad, you're screaming at the top of your lungs. I mean, I was really worried. He said, you must have had a nightmare. He said, yeah, the Japanese were shelling us with artillery. He was reliving it. Even 50 years later, he would remember what it was like to be shelled, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs at night, and I could hear it. And so even though he wouldn't talk to me personally, he wouldn't spontaneously, I would have to initiate to ask him what's going on. And so that's how so when you're relating how sometimes people will just like, in their own way, just kind of move on with their life. That was kind of Dad's way. He just, he'd talk about fishing or sports, never about World War II, almost never. I'd have to raise the subject. So with that, back to what we were trying to do in writing a book. I think I'm going to have to find out. I think you give me wise counsel to try to figure out what my purpose is. I do have some purpose to serve the sort of people that are, the young men, young women, even parents of children going through church who may be at risk. They all are at risk. Many of them will go to college and lose their faith. Part of it is to inform them, to really teach them how, what things they can do to help themselves in the way that I was able to recover my faith when I nearly lost it 25 years ago. And I realized that I wasn't very well served by the congregations I was a part of to deal with the specific problems I was having. So number one was the problem of evil. How can we be in a world where there's a God and he's letting all these bad things happen, like Auschwitz or whatever? And I was in church 40 years and I never really, it's like, well, God's ways are mysterious. I'm like, well, okay, I can almost accept that, but can't you give me something more substantive? It was only like in the last 7 years, I got the answer. 2 Corinthians 4:17, for this momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal way to glory. And I said, okay, so now if Christ is raised from the dead, when bad things happen to us, it's building for us an eternal way to glory. And having that artistic sense, I said, I really like the story Snow White. And I read it to my Bible study one time. The whole story took 10, 15 minutes. I said, okay, what would happen? Would the happy ending be as meaningful if there were no evil queen? Like, no. I said, see, that's it. Is she, so Snow White struggles, has all these horrible things happen to her. She's killed by the evil queen, and she's raised from the dead. And I said, gee, aren't there Christian themes there? And then the evil queen's destroyed, and Snow White is raised from the dead, and she lives happily ever after. And I'm like, oh, that something about that story resonates and makes sense of all the bad. And so when I said, well, would the happy ending be as meaningful without the evil queen? Everyone just totally got it. I said, okay, I mean, that's still a hard pill to swallow, that we're going to suffer, but that's the best thing I can give as to the problem of evil. It will make sense because of Christ's resurrection. And that was one of the primary messages I wanted to get out.
Interesting. I just wonder if, I'm just thinking about a book that you maybe would want to write would be The Gospel in Fairy Tales.
Yes.
For me, I'm a plotter, not a pantser. Some people write by the seat of their pants and they just start. Other people plot where they say, okay, this is chapter 1, now chapter 2, now chapter 3. I don't know which way you go. It sounds to me that being with a scientific background probably would be more like a plotter. But then I'm thinking, all right, well, how about if you figure out what topics you want to address, and then see if there are any fairy tales, and maybe write a book about the gospel in fairy tales.
Oh my goodness.
There's an idea.
You are so bold to say something a topic I was reluctant to even broach, but it is on my heart. C.S. Lewis kind of actually pioneered this. He began to see a lot of what was expressed in mythology is paralleling what was actually in the Christian faith, but it was kind of like behind a veil. You saw through the glass darkly through the fairy tales, but when he became a Christian, he said, now it makes sense why you always have some of these recurring themes. It's so deeply woven in our hearts. And so that has been a project. And for the people that are, I have encountered enough people, and everyone actually, suffering through personal tragedies. It's just so overwhelming. And it's like, well, why would God do this? And I'm like, well, I'm dealing with the same thing. How can I articulate this? And so the first thing was the Snow White. But then there are other things about human experience that are so expressed by fairy tales. Why is it that I'm seeing these girls get married and, they want to live happily ever after? I said, I don't think that's an accident. We live in a fallen world where the path back to paradise, the original paradise, Eden, is guarded by a cherub that has a flaming sword. And so happily ever after is often really hard to attain in this life. And from personal experience, I know 6 individuals as part of their weddings, actually, they lost their spouse in the first year of their marriage. Tragedy,
Wow.
either illness or accident or whatever. And I'm like, God, this is real life. You know what happened to the fairy tale that I was expecting for all six of them? And I was really, I'm like, I don't think this was an accident that God let me see all this.
And
And
even if they had, if their spouse had survived, it wouldn't have been a fairy tale. You know, I've been married 46 years. I have a wonderful husband. His wife is okay, but he's a really good husband. And I've got to tell you, it has not been a fairy tale the whole time. It's just, you know, it's not. It's two selfish people living together. It's the way it goes. You know, you got to learn.
and I do think, okay, so whether, I mean, this is not the place to discuss my take on this. I'll publish it in a book, and then you can write your
Okay,
critique on
sounds good.
Amazon
Move on.
with what you think of my ideas. But basically, I really do think the longing for an eternal honeymoon
Oh yeah.
is deeply ingrained in us, because that was our original state. We weren't supposed to have all these problems. We weren't supposed to live in a fallen world where couples end up hating each other. And I've seen too many marriages. I said, look, I totally get it, but Jesus said, in this world you're going to have trouble. And then when God slew Ezekiel's wife, I was like, he was like the most righteous man. I mean, if anyone that should have been living happily ever after, it should have been him. You know, why Ezekiel?
Mm.
And again, this has all come to the forefront because these are some of these six individuals that I know. They're friends, and I was traumatized. I said, you know, God, why? They're just starting their life, you know, and it was really breaking my heart. And so I began to realize I come across a lot of people with trauma. So that's one of the books. The number one reason that people either do not become Christians or they leave the faith, and I've just polled them. I said, there are two of them. It's hard to say which one's number one or number two. But at the top of the list perennially has been the problem of evil. How could a good God let all this happen? And because I've had to deal with it myself, I'm trying to express how I found comfort. And then the second one is obviously the science stuff, which is totally shifting gears, which has been a lot of my work. And I'm trying to make it very interesting. Since the time you and I had known each other and all the stuff that happened at, you know, back then 20 years ago, there have been people that have been also persecuted for coming out. And some of them are evolutionary biologists. And I'm just like, wow, you know, there is a climate now where we're a little bit freer, not totally. I mean, it's thought out a little bit, but there's still a lot of hostility to talk about some of these things. And there've been a lot of discoveries. And now when I go to conferences, I'm seeing more and more university professors and saying, well, I'm rejecting everything. And so I'm seeing it in the graduate students. There is a move that's happening. And I might give some of my own scientific input, but I think some of the stories of these individuals and their transformation could be compelling. There was one, I have permission to share this, and I can't use her real name. She's a trained evolutionary biologist. She lost her fiance through a heroin overdose. And when she was cleaning up his apartment, found all this stuff about Darwin and how all these lyrics that were so anti-God. He was so angry at God, and he just seemed to worship Darwin. And I'm just like, and then she's an evolutionary biologist. She eventually left that. It was just a compelling story. And, you know, we had a chance to discuss, you know, all this. I'm just like, this is too good. This is too juicy a story not to convey, and then also add on some of the other anecdotes. So
There we are.
whether this will be, and then plus, you had written a technical book on microbiology in your home or something. What was the title?
Microbiology experiments you can do at home.
Okay,
Yeah.
To me, this is so cool. You have kind of this whole spectrum. So we were talking about like the formulaic, and the readers come to expect you're going to follow a certain formula.
That was just, it was because I was teaching microbiology during COVID. And so I was teaching it online, and I knew that these students were going to become doctors and nurses and would never have a chance to do a microbiology lab at an undergraduate level. And I thought, this is not good. They've got to experience a few germs. So I, put my thinking cap on, and I thought, okay, how can I get them to do microbiology in their home? Well, it's not that hard. You can buy Petri dishes with agar already poured on Amazon. You have germs around your house, And so I was like, all right, let's write a few experiments that they can do at home. And you know what? Those were their favorite experiments. And even when we started to be able to meet in person again, I incorporated experiments from that book into my course because the students loved them. They were always the favorite. To go to your house and to say, okay, what's the germiest place in my house? And to try a few different places and, find out that it isn't the toilet. It was just, people loved it. So there we are.
Okay, so you're dealing with a problem that I'm going to encounter. I'm not going to be like a formulaic writer. The spectrum of things that I, want to write, that I feel that I want to express, it doesn't fit one specific genre. I often think that if someone actually read, like, certainly my technical work in math, you would never recognize it from when I'm talking about fairy tales. Just you think they're two different people. So, all right. Well, I think if I actually get to the point where I have these things committed to a print format, I can send them off to you or give you a complimentary copy if I actually publish it. So I think I know what I need to do. The next step is to actually just have a complete document ready to go, to be what you said, beta read or beta tested, and then clean it up, have it subject to Grammarly, which praise God for that, because I was involved in, I've published in peer review, praise the Lord for that. Not because I was particularly brilliant, but I was on the coattails of some really good co-authors. And the Grammarly has saved all the automated grammar stuff. Is, oh my goodness, it caught like 300, 400, 500. We had a 70-page document, and it was unbelievable how much that thing caught. And
I still use a content editor for some books, not for all of them. Where I have a particularly wonderful woman who helped me with the children's picture books that I wrote, because I told the story, but she went through and made the story more engaging. And that content editing was great. But for, punctuation and grammar, you can pay someone, but on the other hand, Grammarly does not cost as much. And I know it's putting people out of a job, but it's, let's face it, as an author, you're not bringing in the big bucks. In fact, you're spending the bucks. So, use the cheap alternative, because really you don't have a lot of choice.
So you raised the topic of, so you have a beta reader and then the content editor. And at what stage do you invoke the content editor?
It depends on if you want to do that. With the books about Clemmy the brave bulldog, I was not happy with the way they read, and I didn't really know how to fix it because I wasn't used to writing children's books. So I employed a content editor who was really very helpful. She said, well, every page should end with the word me because kids like repetition, and just gave me lots of little tips that were very helpful. And then when I when I did my next children's book series, I didn't use a content editor because I didn't need one. Instead, I used a couple of beta readers, and one of them went nuts at me. And that was actually rather instructive as well, because I was writing about my own childhood when I lived in Canada in the 1960s as the daughter of immigrants. And it's just fun stories, just, for early reading kids, early chapter book. And just silly stories, like when I peeled gum off the playground and chewed it because my parents said that you can't chew gum because they're from Europe and they thought that makes you look like a cow. I did survive. Just, but it was funny because what I didn't realize was that because I lived it, I didn't realize how this would come across to younger readers. And I had someone who was so upset because I mentioned that my parents threatened to spank me. Well, you know what? My parents not only threatened, they did it, because that was not thought to be a bad thing to do in those days. Now it's the worst of the worst. So I had to listen to what that beta reader said and soften the language so as not to traumatize the kids of today who don't get spanked. So it was just, so the beta reader was very helpful.
So that was very instructive, by the way. By the way, is that book My Exciting Everyday Escapades?
Yes, My Exciting Everyday Escapades, My Amazing Everyday Adventures. There's 4 of them. Yes.
Oh, well, let me, if I may, do a shameless plug for you.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. There it is. And I'll ask you again, partly, I probably know the answer, but that pretty little girl there, is that you?
It is. It's me. And it's actually a dress that my mother made because, being immigrants, we didn't have money. And so Mom made all my clothing. She made everybody's clothing. And so, yeah, that's a dress Mom made for me.
That is, it's so nice you have these pictures of yourself. I would have thought a professional photographer had made.
Well, I have an amazing man who I have hired through freelancer.com, which is another great tip for your listeners. Yes. If you need an illustrator or you need a cover designer, post a contest on freelancer.com. What I did was I said, sorry.
No, go ahead. I interrupted you. I apologize.
So I said, this is the topic of the book. And so I need a cover. I would like this picture to be used. And so he was able to give me a cover based on that. And the photograph I gave him was black and white. And then I told him what colors need to be in the picture. And he did everything himself. He sharpened it up. He improved the colors. But the incredible thing is the contest, the original contest where I hired him, it was a $50 prize. And I got 100 people sending me in cover designs. Since then, I always just hire him directly. And so he gets more than that. But, it was a very good way of finding the cover designer and the illustrator that I work best with.
Well, that was the $1 million moment when I attended your lecture on publishing. I said, that was really clever. And I'm like, I wish I had a recording of that talk, because you actually were identifying where to go. And so you said it's freelancer.com or?
Freelancer.com, yeah.
Okay, see, and I have, by the way, here's a picture of another book by Caroline, My Marvelous Everyday Moments. And I got to ask again, is that you?
It is, yeah.
On the cover?
Yep. Yeah, it's that's actually, that one is kind of fun because, I was say 9 at the end of that book. And my father had just told me that we were going to move to the United States. And I said, but Dad, they have cowboys and Indians there. You know, I'd been watching TV. And he said, yeah. And I said, so aren't they dangerous? And he said, no, I don't think so. And, you know, kind of left me like that. And so I talked to my friend about it, my best friend, who I didn't know was a First Nation child from Canada. But, you know, to me, she was just Debbie. So I said, Debbie, you know, we're going to move. And I think cowboys and Indians are dangerous. And she goes, well, she said, cowboys aren't dangerous because they're just men who ride cows. Okay. Jesus. And Indians, well, that's me. And it was mind blowing. I have never forgotten how shocked I was. So I don't know, just a little girl's, I don't know, thoughts about the kind of hot button issues that we face today.
And okay, and so this one is available on Kindle for $1.99.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
See, now you've gotten my interest.
Yeah, it's just you know, I figured people can use it for bedtime stories because each chapter is a standalone.
Well, this is, especially since I know you, this is just going to be nice to, you know, to find out. You know, my friend has basically told some of her life story, and now I don't have to bug her and ask her all these questions.
Yeah, and you know, I was merciless to myself. I was such a pesky child. I don't know. I don't think I've changed very much.
But I'm going to remember that one about pulling off the gum and putting it in your mouth.
Yes. I don't remember which of those 4 books it was in, but yes, I did do that.
Well, it sounds just totally, I mean, this sounds very delightful. You know, honestly, what I have noticed on the YouTube sphere, as far as teaching science, some of the very successful people who teach science through YouTube have been able to add that extra dimension just to make it fun, to make a boring topic, to add a little life to it. So it's not like the lectures you and I had been raised up in when we were going through school.
Yeah.
And it's almost necessary now because we're competing for people's attention and it's harder to keep them engaged. Because you're competing against all the levels of excitement that they are, you know, the modern age has given them so many avenues to just have their minds just stimulated. And it's like, well, you know, it's not that I'm trying to make learning just a totally fun time, but it's kind of like Mary Poppins saying, you know, a teaspoon of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Yep.
And so there's going to be a dimension of having to write in a way that is compelling, entertaining. If I'm even talking about a technical topic, but going back to this fairy tales and the Bible, that is one way to make it a little bit more engaging rather than, you know, kind of the, you know, I don't want this to be like a theological discussion. I want it to be compelling, but then also helpful at a personal level. So anything that I could do, any ideas that I'm able to gather, even if I have to spend a little more time just giving anecdotes just to make people smile, because it'll help them remember. It's particularly if the illustration actually describes what you're trying to convey, but if you could do it in a way that they won't forget. And I do have to admit that one about you and the chewing gum is pretty good. Especially coming from a biology professor.
Yeah, funny thing is I survived, you know.
Okay, so the freelancer thing is great. And I thoroughly agreed with what you said. The cover sells the book. People judge the book by the cover.
They do.
And I had been trying to solve that problem for a long time. And you gave the solution 2 years ago. And I just wanted, so part of the reason I begged you for this discussion was so I could get, you know, remember, bring to mind exactly the resources you specifically. You gave out this beautiful handout, which I subsequently lost in the shuffle as I've been renovating, and it had all the details, and I feel terrible about that. But that was one of the biggest ones. Now, you had been part of, were there some writers' circles or something, or starting? You said that was very helpful to you.
I mean, I've joined a lot of different writers' groups, and each have been helpful in their own way. So I joined the Northern Virginia Writers Club, which has been helpful in that they have a yearly conference, which is not expensive and very, very useful. And of course, you also are then in contact with other writers. And I was for a while there sharing a booth with them. You know, if you can't afford your own booth at various conventions or fairs, you can always join up with other writers in a club. And I did that for a while, but now with 15 books, I can't. I've got too many of my own books, so I don't do it anymore. But it was a great way to get started. I also joined the Society for Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, which has different benefits. They have talks online that you can listen to where you can learn more about the craft of children's book writing and illustrating. But the most helpful thing I found was a series of meetings with a lady called Joanna Peters. And she is incredibly easy with sharing tips. And so she has put me onto a lot of different places where I could sell books, or different things I can do with my booth to make it more attractive. And so Joanna and I have become, good friends. And so that's also very helpful. So there's just a lot of different groups that you can be in contact with. I just joined the Society for Historical Authors, and so I'll see how that one goes. But is try it, and then if it doesn't help you, then move on, go to a different group.
So, now I noticed your just kind of really basic questions. Do you develop your books on Microsoft Word?
Yes, I always write on Word. And honestly, my first book, Free to Think, that was published by someone else. And so the publisher did the formatting and everything else, provided me with the printed books. And then the next book, Brave Face, I did the hybrid publishing thing because the publisher who was interested is the foremost publisher of Holocaust memoirs. And so I thought, well, that's a useful one to have contact with. And she also did the formatting for me. I also didn't have the confidence at that point to do my own formatting. But since then, I've discovered there are drawbacks, like when I found errors in the book or things that I would like to improve, she won't. And so I'm kind of stuck. So with the next book, Unforgivable, and all those after that, I did it myself. I did the self-publishing route. The drawback of that is you're responsible for formatting it yourself. It's not hard. I've just done it in Word. You just look up online how to format a book, and it tells you. It's just not that hard. And get the cover designed. And then the other thing is a good tip that I was given was do not accept Amazon's free ISBN, because the minute you do, everybody knows you're self-published. Now, they might figure it out anyway, but if you buy your own ISBNs, then you can have your own imprint. So I bought my own ISBNs, and my publishing company is called Rambling Ruminations. And apparently I only have to publish one other person's book, and then I am a publisher. So there we are. Have fun.
Well, okay. Again, this was a data point when I attended your talk on this 2 years ago. I'm like, I remember I didn't even bring a notebook or anything. And then I summarily lost all the beautiful, that little booklet you gave out for free.
Mm.
And well, I'd gone through a lot of trauma the last 2 years, just all the activities, and it just got lost in the shuffle. And I said, writing a book was the last thing on my mind, but now I'm semi-retired.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you, I'm kind of following your path. I now have the freedom to invest more time
Mm-hmm.
in this project. And there are people that have been saying, we want a book from you, Sal, because we've heard you speak on YouTube and we like your stuff. I'm like, okay, would I do it even for, like, it kind of reminds me of Lot asking, I mean, would you do this even if, for 50 or, 10 or even one? I'd say, yeah, I think I would do it for 10. If there are
Yeah.
10 people out there in the world that would benefit from what I write, and that's why my ambition is still just a booklet.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's also easier on the beta readers. But
Yeah.
I do specifically remember now that you were talking about what you just said about the ISBN and then the self-publishing route. And I have standing invitations to speak because of that documentary I was in. People just know about me, and it was my foot in the door. And it's like, well, if I do have a tangible book that they could, when they'll speak about the website shortly. If I have a website and they actually have tangible books and articles that they've seen me I'm a little bit more of a known quantity and what they can expect. I have found out sometimes people will invite authors to speak, even though the people almost know totally in advance what you're going to talk about. They still want that personal touch. So a pastor had advised me. They said, Sal, you writing the book is part of actually someone who's a full-time speaker, Jay Seegert. The first bit of advice he was given by his pastor said, write a book if you want to be a full-time speaker, because that is kind of how you're able to, that's part of the way you advertise yourself as you're a writer and a speaker. And then they can actually see what you've written and they can judge whether they really want to have you as a speaker and come visit them. And so this is part of a larger business plan. Because when I spoke up at a conference in New Jersey, people were asking, do you have a website or a book? I'm like, neither. So I'm like, I'm glad someone cares about what I think they want that. So it's like, well, I could probably deliver a 40-page book. I think I could knock that out. What is your longest book? I mean, how many? I mean, because the font and the number, the font and the size and whatever, but in page numbers, I mean, just roughly, what was your biggest?
Unforgivable is the longest one. Yeah, it's almost 300 pages. So yeah, it's the longest one I've written so far. I think that the one I'm working on right now, The Truth Was Different, is probably going to be longer, but it can't be too long. Otherwise, people don't want it. You just.
Unless you're in Russia, the Russian novels like by Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, they're just so gigantic. I'm like, well, okay.
Well, yeah. Or if you can write about Harry Potter, then you're good. But
well, I guess, in that culture, when you had these long Russian winters, that's all you had to do. All you had available to you is just to read the book because you didn't have television or anything. So, of course, the authors gave them what, met the market need. But 300 pages, for me, that'd be a day of reading. So I can only imagine how long it took to write that.
That one, I was so absorbed in it. It took a year. It did not take that long because I was completely sucked into it. I was so fascinated. Because I didn't know the information ahead of time because Dad didn't talk. So the way I had to find out was by doing a lot of research, and I had historians in the town going around finding information for me, and I found information that his brother had written 15 pages and just all kinds of different sources of information. And I was just so fascinated that I didn't do anything else. That was what I did. So, now Brave Face took much longer because I first wrote down the the fun stories that my mom told me when she was growing up. And then I showed it to her and I said, "So Mom, what do you think?" And she said, "Well, you forgot most of it." I said, "Mom, you didn't tell me that part." So then we spent time on the telephone. And then during COVID, she moved in with us. And so she was sitting next to me, and I could pull information out of her about the more difficult parts, and also to get a picture of her family life. Because one of the rules when you write books is that you should show, not tell. Well, if I could not see her mother or her father, how could I show those to my readers? So I had to ask Mom, okay, what was your mom, when your mom was nervous, what were her mannerisms? What did she do when she was happy? What was her mannerism? Because I can't tell the reader she was happy or she was nervous. I need to show them.
Wow.
So that was something where we sat and I was able to pull that out of her. What did your big sister do when she was nervous? What did your next sister in line do? So I could show people what was happening.
Well, you've just given me another tip, by the way. Show, not tell.
Yeah, make sure you show and don't tell. I just read a book actually by a famous author, and she totally told the whole book. And we discussed it last night at the book club. It's called The Japanese Lover, and by Isabel Allende. She's famous. But the entire book, she just tells, she doesn't show. And we all were saying, we didn't enjoy this book at all. I don't know. In this age of watching videos and television and whatever, people want to see it. They don't want to hear it.
Well,
so you got to write that way to make them see it.
Yes. Just as FYI, there is going to be video. There are going to be video components to the way I communicate things, but the printed book is kind of like the very base, kind of the foundation of a house, and you can build, if you want to have animations or whatever, and those are just totally different skill sets. I'd worked in the defense industry where we did a lot of visual stuff to train pilots. We were trying to train pilots to be able to fly combat missions and to use their equipment. We had to train them how to use new weapon systems and to use their aircraft, how to set up their aircraft and stuff. We spent $40 million. In today's dollars, it'd be 80 million to be able to develop courses that were visual intensive. We were able to train people in 2 days what would take them 3 months, but that just about killed us in terms of how hard we had to work to make a visual presentation. And so, yeah.
So if you want to do visual presentations on your book, here's another tip: use Canva.
Okay, thank you. See, this is so good.
With Canva, all you need to do is say, okay, these are the photographs I want. This is what I want the video to be about. Do it, and it will. Now, you're going to want to tweak it after they do, but at least it gives you a start.
Absolutely. Okay, so now finally, and I thank you for your time, your website. It is such a, what is Rambling Ruminations?
RamblingRuminations.com, yeah.
I mean, I've got to show off your website. I'm going to, for the viewers there, I'm going to put all these links in the video description. And, I hope I haven't lost you. Are you still, okay, my computer's starting to freeze. So that probably means I need to stop the show before we lose this entire recording.
Okay.
But I will show your beautiful, I was like, wow, this is such a nice looking website and I could navigate it. And so, and thank you for sharing all your beautiful trade secrets with me.
Well, thank you. And if you go to my talks, you will find a talk called Read My Rights, and you'll be able to find all the tips there.
Okay,
a video of my talk.
My...
It's not there, but you can enter it into the search bar as well at the top.
I okay. And this wasn't the one that I helped you record. It was someone else, right?
It was, yeah, I did it myself.
When I was at your talk, you had me. Okay.
Yeah.
This was just so well done. So before my computer totally messes up,
Okay.
we'll probably close this down. But how did you build the website? I mean, did you use WordPress? Where did you?
I used Elegant
jaw drops.
Themes by Divi.
Elegant Themes
Elegant
by Divi.
Themes by Divi. And that was something that, do you remember Mario Lopez?
Yes,
That
I
was
know.
something he put me onto because he used to build my website. But, you know, after many years of doing that, I said, okay, I want to learn to do it myself. And he said, use Elegant Themes by Divi, and it has been brilliant. And whenever I get stuck, I just call Mario. Because, you know, well, he stays a friend.
He's just a super guy.
Not the singer. Not the singer, a different one, right?
I didn't even know there was a singer named Mario Lopez, but I know the Mario Lopez you're talking about because I met him in person when I flew out to San Diego.
Yes, he's a great guy.
And I saw some of his diagrams in your book, Free to Think, and I'm just glad to see for 20 years he's been a good friend to all of us. So
yes, he has. Yeah. So
well, anyway, that's all I had. I'll meet you backstage, so I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank all the viewers for tuning in, and to the show where I've gotten to catch up and learn lots of things from Caroline. And till I see you all again, thank you for tuning in. Take care and God bless you.
Thanks.